poet at heart, and that's where I got my start writing, is through poetry. So, I'm not the greatest MC, but give me a microphone, 2 ears, and an open mind, and I will spit until every tear duct in your eye runs dry. I will formulate the most abstract idea, sketch it with my MAC lip liner, and paint the canvas with my tongue until you see things my way. I will cut into your vision and prove to you that pretty girls possess intelligence. I will contradict every life lesson that your mother taught you, because rebellion is my middle name. I'm not the greatest MC, but give me one good ear and a beating heart, and I'll save this world. I was born on the Ides of March, but that's the only thing Caesar and I have in common: my life and his death. I am the next Maya Angelou. I just taught my cage bird how to sing. She just can't fly. Harriet Tubman left me a note telling me to dig up her pistol in 2013 because the Underground Railroad is still in place. Noah promised to help me build a fire-resistant ark because time is running out. You watch me this week, right? I am not the greatest MC, but if you give me 2 deaf ears and a sign language manual, I will start a revolution. Say word. Word. Okay, so that's what I like to do. I kind of wanted to be informal but informal today, and just talk a little bit about my journey to publishing this book, 9 Years Under, Coming of Age in an Inner City Funeral Home. I started writing this book about a very long time ago, in 2005. This was my grad school thesis, and I had worked in the funeral business from the time that I was 15 years old. I started working there. I had lost my great aunt who had lived with me my entire life, my Aunt Mary. She's the reason why I am single today, because she spoiled me. I never had to wash a dish, never had to make a bed, never had to cook a meal, never had to do anything, because I had an Aunt Mary that lived with us, and she passed away. And once she passed away, Mr. Wiley, who was a close family friend and a friend of my parents, and he buried Aunt Mary. We all went to this church right down the street on North Avenue, Greater New Hope Baptist Church. He offered me a job, and I said, okay, I'll accept this job, and I started working in the funeral home. It started off as a summer job, but it ended up being 9 years. So I was only supposed to be there. I'm like, I need to know what this man did to my Aunt Mary. Just need to get in there, make sure this is a good business. Then I'll get out. It was a few weeks during the summer. But then I got into it, and I really enjoyed being there. And so every summer I worked there during high school and college, after school, and then when I graduated from the College of Notre Dame, I began working there full time. And so when I first started writing this book, I was actually working at the funeral home. And so everybody knows that I'm writing this book. I'm really, really excited about it. I'm like, yes, I'm gonna write it. So I'm literally in the room making funeral arrangements with families, like taking notes, like, yes, this woman said this, and she has on this, and they said this. And so that was me really feeling like I was being a writer. At that point, you know, you go to college and they tell you all these things to do. They teach you how to take notes and how to interview and report and that. And so I was really like taking notes on it. Then I got fired a year into writing this book. And I said, you know what? I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. I don't want to write about this anymore. I don't want to tell this story. And so everyone's like, no, you're already a year into the program, you need to graduate, you need to tell this story. Because I had accumulated 9 years of stories about families in Baltimore City who had to deal with death in some type of way. There was homicides, there were cancer victims, there were diabetes victims, there were so many different things, and there were so many unusual stories that I had been telling all of these years. And people were like, no, you need to write this down. And so I was really put in this position trying to figure out if I wanted to write this story or just move on with my life. And I ended up writing this story. And it was a challenge for me. And so I really had to face myself. So that's my first point, is that when you write memoir, when you write creative nonfiction, when you write an autobiography, you have to be willing to face yourself on the page. And that's difficult to do. The entire time that I was at Goucher, I started the grad program when I was 23 years old. I was the youngest person in their program. I was also the only black girl in their program. And everyone kept saying, you know what, you're just too young to write memoir. You're too young to write memoir. I'm like, what do you mean I'm too young? I have all these great experiences. I've done all these things. I have all these wonderful stories that I want to tell. When I look at it now, I agree with them. I was a little bit too young to write a memoir at that particular time because I didn't have that emotional distance that I needed. And that's another thing that you need when you're writing nonfiction, is to be able to have emotional distance from it. I was very hurt when I was fired from this funeral home. And these characters in this book, these were real life people. These were people that I truly loved. So it was very difficult for me to deal with that. It's like, they broke my heart. Do I write this, usually if I were giving advice to someone, I would say, just write it down. Put all the raw emotion on the page. Just, let this writing heal you. But I was also writing this as a project, as a long-term project. So this wasn't a therapy session for me. This wasn't a journal writing thing. This was really my real life. And so I had to let it sit for a very long time before I really touched it again and really deal with my emotions. Baltimore had become a metropolis of death. The blackened streets were often stained with blood, broke with yellow tape, and draped with guilt and shame. Warning shots no longer ricocheted through the air like fireworks. A new breed of marksman was hitting his target. Gunshot wounds to the head, multiple gunshot wounds, whatever it took to make sure the victim never breathed again. Bullets and black-on-black violence caused the pool of men that I should have been dating to shrink each day. Every time I turned around, there I was, ordering another nameplate. I know immediately just by looking at their names, Dante, Jarrell, Tavon, Rashid, that they were young homicide victims. Many of them had criminal pasts. Some were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The majority were under 30. More and more of them hadn't even earned a high school diploma. They'd be worn by their praying grandmothers and hopeful aunties and often whisked off to church for intervention. They give their life to Christ, attend a few services, and memorize the lyrics to Kirk Franklin's crossover gospel hits. But when the streets call, they always answer. I once saw a boy walk down the aisle of a church, vowing tearfully to dedicate himself to God after a convincing sermon by the preacher. 2 weeks later, that same boy was in our basement. Often the shooters were just babies themselves, whether they suffered their own loss of a loved one, succumbed to drug abuse, or had their spirit broken through incarceration. They never grasped the value of life. Some had fathers who were locked away in prison, or who had been gunned down, or mothers who were strung out on drugs, or out on the streets doing what they needed to do to get a fix. They were young men who raised themselves because their grandmothers just couldn't do it. And so when they were old enough to become errand boys for the local dope dealers, or to be initiated into one of the local gangs, they found something to kill for. The streets were so deadly that people started to call the city Bodymore Murderland. We weren't living in Charm City, it was Harm City. Even in cases where a gun was not the weapon, the autopsy results still read blunt force trauma to the head, multiple stab wounds, or something else tragic and inhumane. Ms. Suwali was often left to perform major reconstructive work, like a surgeon, suturing the bodies that had just been hacked open by the medical examiner. Although he wasn't saving lives, he was saving face, literally restoring their physical features for the afterlife. Gangbangers and dope dealers were not the only ones caught in the violence. There were many innocent bystanders too. The flashy boys with real jobs and nice cars who were killed over a botched robbery or carjacking. The young guys whose only sin was having good taste. Our tiny little corner with the lovely canopy didn't fool anyone. The Wiley Funeral Home fell right in the middle of it all. My father slept with his police radio on, and I could hear the 911 calls from the neighborhood coming through the night. I strained to listen to the cross streets when I heard a homicide called in to see if we had a chance of getting the body. The calls were almost always from the neighborhood surrounding the funeral home, and the perpetrators that my father had to interrogate in the middle of the night had probably walked past our building earlier in the day. And I loved soaking it all in. And my parents' attempt to give us a better life, they kept us far away from the action of the streets. I hardly stepped from my own front porch to walk alone in our safe neighborhood. My bedroom wall was plastered with Lion King posters, and I spent my Friday nights with encyclopedias and note cards. I was the studious, innocent baby of the family my parents expected me to be. But I felt like I had missed out on the very experiences that had made their childhoods rich. The West Baltimore they grew up in was long gone. They both managed to escape, unlike many of the people they had grown up with, before crack took its toll and the affluent families moved out of the neighborhoods. Some of their childhood friends ended up in jail, some ended up on welfare, others ended up on drugs, and some ended up downstairs in the basement of the funeral home. My father's family still lived on the west side, and when I visited my grandmother, Big Mama, I had a taste of all the things I longed for. I ran through the alleys of her neighborhood playing hot butter bean with the rest of my cousins, jumped off porches and climbed walls. The permanent scar on my chin came from a day of play in the hood. But as I got older, we stopped visiting Big Mama's houses often, and I lost that connection. However, I didn't lose my curiosity. I was infatuated with the hood. Many of my friends and family members grew up in environments similar to Gilmore Street. And while they always said escape to my house for sleepovers and weekend getaways, I always wanted to run to theirs. I dreamed of buying penny candy and now ladies from the corner store, soaking my chicken box in salt, pepper, ketchup, and letting yakame noodles or the Chinese drink swell in my stomach. I couldn't disguise that I was from the other side of town. All of my friends told me that I didn't sound right when I cursed. People who called the funeral home often thought I sounded like a white woman. Even Miss Angela made fun of me and called me a librarian on the days I styled my hair in a bun and wore my gold rimmed glasses. The other day she called me Sister Bertrell because she said I acted like a nun. Available for sale. This book, 9 Years Under, they are $20 at Sheri Booker, SHERI Booker.com. And I do, maybe not in an hour, but usually in 48 hours, I return all the mails for everyone. So feel free if you have questions. I would love to connect with you all. And I wish you the best.
I just want to say thank you to the Black Writers Guild of Maryland for having me at this event. It felt so good to be amongst fellow writers, and I was just in a good place and a good